my mic on. Let me get my mic on. Guess who's back? Good. Guess who's back with a brand new invention? What's up, y'all? Long time, man. Long time. We clip this. Answer some questions. There we go. Now looking how I look. Look good? Oh yeah. Alright, let me check this camera out. Oh, looking good. Alright, fellas, let's get to the point. Let's get started. Oh God, it's been too damn long. Man, has it been long. Y'all missed so much, man. I had so much happen. We won't get into all that, but I moved houses. I'm in the process of building a new studio, so you guys I can do this a lot more easy. I don't have to keep setting up and cleaning up and setting up. Boat's right there, big garage, second floor. Life's good, man. Moved on some bigger land, bigger house. Yeah, life's been good, man. Can't complain. Been out fishing today. Me and Johnny Jigs went out. The guy that makes my jigs and chatterbaits and all kind of other baits for me, and we whacked them pretty good, man. It was water temperature was 51 degrees. Caught them pretty good. Had a good day. Caught a lot of fish. You know, life was good. Life is good. Life is good. All right, I wanted to answer your guys' questions that you asked me recently. Like I said, I'm running out of content to use. I just don't know. I don't know what I should be talking about. Every now and again, I'll get in these little patterns where I don't feel like talking about much, or I don't know what to talk about. So it helps that you guys want to, ask me questions. It's a lot easier for me to be able to answer you, because then I got something to talk about. I got a few questions from the last post on YouTube that I posted. And if you guys don't follow me, make an Instagram account and go on Instagram and type in Scar Fishing and follow me. So if you guys don't keep up with me here, you can keep up with me there. And it's a lot easier because I post more than once every couple months, so I have a lot more content on there. You guys will see some fish that I catch. It's pretty cool. So check that out. Also, I wanted to let you guys know that I was invited to do a podcast that's on Apple Podcasts. I don't know if you guys have an iPhone, but if you have Apple Music, there's a link to the podcasts on your screen. If you go on there, we just did like a 2-hour podcast for the After 5 podcast. So if you go into podcasts and you search the After 5 podcast. It was pretty fun. We talked about some stuff. We talked about fishing. We talked about work. We talked about a little bit of politics. But it was cool. So if you guys are interested in that, I will post the link on my Instagram eventually. So keep up with me on Instagram, and we'll be able to, you'll be able to follow me that way. So let's get into the questions that I've been getting asked. Jug KMK Galo, sorry man, not Galo. What colors to use for what baits? Now with my color selection, I keep it relatively simple. Like I don't, if you've seen any of my baits or any of my all my tackle in my boat, I really don't do anything outside the normal. It's pretty much simple. I'm either going to mimic shad, I'm going to mimic bluegill, or I'm going to mimic crayfish. And usually crawfish and bluegill are typically the same color. And then when you're fishing for shad, or you're fishing shad colored baits, those are going to be the same as your white crappie and little minnows and stuff like that. So there's a lot more that you're imitating than just the main forage. So what colors I use? We'll start with springtime. I use some reds because your crawfish are a little bit red in color. Plus also some of the shad have a lot of in cold water, they get these really red tints to them. So the red baits seem to work good in the spring. Now again, I'm in the Northeast, so this is, in the colder climates of the world. And we're not talking about Florida here. So it's going to be mainly just for the Northeast. I use a lot of red, rattle traps, crankbaits, and then I'll use mainly shad colors in the early spring, which would be white, white and black, gray, light green and white, anything that mimics a shad, chartreuse. And then, summertime, when we switch to summertime, then I start using, the spawn and into the summer, then I'll start mimicking bluegill a lot more. So I'm using black and blue, green pumpkin, mainly. I really don't throw white a whole lot in the summertime, with the exception of cranking. If I'm cranking, I always go with a gizzard shad color crankbait, always. And then again, so I'm switching to bluegill colors in the summer, and then when it gets into the fall, then I'm switching back to shad. So I'm using more white and black shad colors, and then once it gets into the wintertime, then I'm gonna still be mimicking shad. Every now and again, I'll pick up bluegill color jig or something like that. So to answer that question as short as I possibly can, I don't own anything that's not red, white, or a hue of black and blue or green pumpkin. Everything's pretty much the same. I don't go crazy with colors. If you have green pumpkin purple, green pumpkin green, green pumpkin blue, it's all the same. It's just, linked into that green pumpkin category. So don't try to go crazy with colors. Keep it simple. I find it a lot easier doing that. So hopefully that answered your question, Jug. Morris Benfield. Morris has been following us for a while. He had a boat. He just traded it in or sold it and bought a kayak. So he's doing a lot more kayak fishing. But his question was what to do when it seems nothing is biting. And I get this question a lot. If you fish tournaments, or if you have ever, mainly if you've ever fished tournaments, you will learn real quick that when you think nothing's biting, there are always fish biting. Always. There is no exception to that rule. Fish will bite no matter what. You just have to find them. Find the active ones. So in my mind, there's no such thing as there aren't fish biting. Like, it's not like, you go out one day and you don't catch them. You're like, well, they must not have been biting. That is never true. Ever. There are always fish that are willing to eat. Normally what I do, there's two ways that I go about this. If I feel like it's super tough. So let's put that fish are not biting out of your head. So let's go with it's super tough. If it's super tough and I haven't got bit in a few hours or something like that, what I tend to do is if I don't think that they're actively feeding, I'm going to go with a reaction bite. Because one thing about bass is if they're not eating, if they're not, feeding at that time, you can always get them to react to it. So how would you do that? The first thing I would do if I thought things were tough is I would find wood, always. Now, depending on the time of year, it'll be shallow wood or deep water, whatever, or rocks or something that's hard, right? There's always going to be fish relating to wood, always. So if they're not actively feeding, then what I'm going to do is try to get them to react to it. So if I'm going down a bank and I know that there's, laydowns or wood, I'm going to throw a crankbait, or I'm going to throw a spinnerbait, a swim jig. I'm going to throw something that's going to deflect off that cover, because what happens is when you're coming down a bank, when there's a fish on wood and that bait just stays up above it and it comes by, that fish might just look at it and just let it go, right? He's not actively feeding. But if that fish is next to a log and this bait comes by and it hits that log, this is why I always tell you deflection is important, and it hits that log in front of his face, it's going to kind of twist and flare the blades right in front of him. So his first reaction, like if a baseball were thrown at you, you're going to swat it away, right? Right? Yeah, you like that move, didn't you? So if the bait's coming towards him and it jumps and flares in his face, his first reaction is to eat it. Just open your mouth and eat it. So that's, if it's super tough and I know it's tough and I'm not getting bit, that's the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get a reaction bite. And I'm not talking let's just do this for 10, 15 minutes. Give it a little bit, Go an hour or two and fish a lot of wood and see if you can't deflect it off that cover and get one to react to it. Another good way to do that is with crankbaits. A crankbait will deflect better than almost any bait if you don't get it hung up. A square bill is a perfect example. Even deep diving baits, because it's trudging along the bottom and it's bouncing off rocks and wood, and those fish have two options: either eat it or get the fuck out of the way. So, especially if you're burning that bait and it's coming quick. Most of the time, they're going to eat it. They're not going to move away from it. So that's a good question, Morris. But that's what I would do is I'm looking for a reaction strike. You can also go the opposite way, which would be to go super light and super finesse. But I still feel like if they're not in that feeding mood, then it doesn't matter what you put in front of them. You're not going to get that fish to feed out of hunger, even if it's smaller or bigger. I feel like that's just, in my mind, I want it to deflect. I'm going to make that fish eat. It's not that I'm going to make him hungry enough to eat. It's that I'm going to deflect it in his face until he can't stand it anymore and he eats it. All right, so that's a good question. And there's a lot of answers to it, but that's how I would go about it. And then MF asked how to break down a lake for each season. This is a super difficult question because I could do an entire video on just this question alone. So breaking down a lake for each season, I'll give you a short version of it. So in the early spring, I know that the water's starting to rise, the temperature's starting to rise. Where those fish have wintered at is cold. So they're looking for any excuse that they can get in the early spring to move up close to the bank to find warmer water, whatever. The bait seems to move towards the bank, so the bass seem to too. And they're also trying to feed up heavy for that spawn that's coming. So in the early season, early spring, I'm typically going to be on the bank 10 foot or less, I would say. Yeah, definitely 10 foot or less. Now, once it moves into summertime or later in the spring, of course, you're still going to stay on the bank 10 foot or less. Once it gets to the spawn, then it's going to be 5 foot or less. Then you get into that post spawn. Now, in post spawn, there's a bunch of stuff you can do. I typically stay on the bank. So I'm going to be fishing still to that 5 foot or less, 10 foot or less, all the way up until, sometimes August. Here in the Northeast, after they spawn, then they're going to be chasing bluegill around that are making beds. Then you still have a shad spawn that's going on. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on shallow, a lot of activity. So I would stay on the bank. And then once it gets into July, so we'll call July, August, September, summer. In the summer, I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between deep and shallow. I want to find out which one. There's going to be fish in both areas. You just want to find out where your bigger fish are coming from. And then, again, in the fall, I think spring in the fall. And then in the winter, I think summer. So whatever you do in the early spring, you're going to do the same thing in the fall. And then whatever you do in the summer, you're going to do the same thing in the winter. That's the easiest way. As far as breaking down lakes each season, it's such a tough question to answer because there's so many ways to answer it. But any time of the year, I don't care what time of the year it is, anytime you have a creek that's coming into the lake that's feeding fresh water, that's always, always, always a good spot as far as anywhere near where that fresh water comes in. I'm not saying directly where the creek meets it. I'm saying that entire arm where that water is pushing in the back is always more oxygenated because it always has water flowing through it. So that is always a place to look for bass if you don't know a lake. If I don't know a lake, that's typically what I'm starting with. I'm looking for creek arms. I'm looking for incoming water. I'm looking for rivers coming in. I'm looking for springs coming in. I'm looking for channel swings. All these things are definitely detrimental to whether or not you're going to find fish or not. Don't make it too difficult on yourself, Like, some bass fishermen think way too far into it. Just think simple, like as humans, we're the same way the fish are the same way. If the sun's in your eyes, you move out of the sun. You go into the shade. If it's 90 degrees outside, you want shade or air conditioning. So they're either going to go deeper where it's cooler water, or they're going to find water coming in that's oxygenated, that's cooler water. So it's going to keep flowing and they're going to, feel like they're in cooler water or shade. And any time of the year that holds true. Bass like to remain hidden. So anything that's going to hide them is perfect. So that's a good question. I could do a whole video on just that, and I might do that. Another question I got asked was, how deep is too deep? For me, everybody's going to be different. I know guys that'll fish in 50, 60 foot and they'll catch bass that way. I'm not patient enough for that. I want to find active fish and I want to do it efficiently and fast. So I'm not going to spend too much time on an area, number one. 15 minutes is too long for me. And another thing is I'm never going to fish deeper than 25 foot, ever. I know there's some places you have to. I'll find fish that aren't that deep. 25 foot is my max. I like to fish deep. I will fish deep. But if I can't maintain contact with a crankbait on the bottom, I don't want to fish it. It's too deep. So with that being said, every year's too different. So if you're going to ask me how deep is too deep for you, 25 foot. That's my max, complete max. And it's very rare that I'm going to fish that deep. The only times that I'm going to fish that deep are in the middle of the winter time and in the middle of the summertime. Those are the only two times that I'll even look that deep. Sometimes, late summer, they'll get that deep too, because that thermocline, they'll start following that thermocline. So if it gets down to 30 foot, then I'll have no choice but to go to 30. But I'm not going any deeper than 25. I'm not doing it. It takes way too long. St. Lawrence River, when I fish up there, those fish will they'll generally get 60, 70 foot. They don't care. It's river current constantly, so there's no thermocline, so they can set up wherever they want. But there's always going to be a population of bass that live shallow year round. I'm a shallow water fisherman at heart. That's what I love to do. If I had a choice, I would fish shallow year round. And this year I did. Matter of fact, me and Tyler won the tournament in July and never fished deeper than 5 foot. So that's in the heart of the summer, so you can find those fish. Just fish your strengths and don't worry about what anybody else is doing. Just do what you want to do. And try to keep up with your strengths, So that's what I do. Hopefully these questions, look, guys, if you guys got questions, please ask, man, because there's no stupid question. I'll answer everything. It helps me out a lot because then I can make a video and not have to worry about what I'm going to set up to do. I know exactly what I'm going to talk about, and it helps me maintain that topic. But like I said, if you guys have not followed me on Instagram, follow me on Instagram and After 5 Podcast, the After 5 Podcast. Make sure you check that out because that's going to be a good podcast that we had last week. It should be out Tuesday. I'm not sure if it'll be out exactly Tuesday, but one day this week it'll definitely be out. So I hope you guys are all doing well, man. I'm sorry it took this long, but shit happens. I'll put them up as often as I can. The more questions you guys ask, the quicker it's going to be, because as soon as I got a topic to talk about, I'm going to talk about it. And I like to cover topics that there's not a million videos on. It helps, it's great for people that are local around here, and it's also great for people that search the internet, just love bass fishing and like to hear about it. So do me a favor and send me some more questions, and I'll talk to you guys soon.